Right, we are going to start working the back of the head and ears. So we're going to be working kind of along this part at the moment, and that is interesting because at the moment the stitches we want to work are either side here, there are the cheeks stitches held on waste yarn or stitch markers, but that's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. So to start with, I'm going to just start on the left side, so that's the right side as I'm looking at it, but it's Bunny's left cheek. And if I turn the stitches this way with the right side facing me, my first row is a knit row, which means I want to start knitting with this stitch. So obviously my needle point needs to be at this side of the work. So I will be picking up the stitches from the left side to the right side. If this is awkward for you, I'm terribly not left-handed. Oh gosh, look at that, I managed it. If it is awkward, obviously you can flip it over and pick it up from right to left, but as long as you are in a position where your needle point is to the right and ready to knit, that is absolutely no problem. So I've got all those stitches back on the needle, and I'm going to pull my waste yarn out, which is where smooth yarn comes into its own because it's coming through without kind of catching that yarn at all. So that's lovely. So we're going to rejoin the yarn, or work again with yarn B, which is the brown or cinnamon colour yarn. And rejoining yarn or joining yarn is, as I've probably said already, it's nothing more than just working a knit stitch by just looping the yarn around the needle and off you go. You can always, if you want to, tie that end with the end that's already kind of lurking at the back there to keep it nice and safe and neat. And I'll probably do that in a bit, but I can't do knots on camera. It's disastrous, so I'll do it at the end. Right, so we're going to be working row 1 of the head back, and that is a decrease row. So to start with, I'm going to knit 5. And I'm going to slip one stitch and knit 1 stitch and pass that slip stitch over. Okay, so just a little decrease there, do another little knit and then a knit together, so do another decrease the other side of that eye socket and knit the last 6 stitches on the needle. Okay, so I've now reached the end of those cheek stitches, the left cheek stitches, and I need to bring the right cheek stitches into play. So same thing again, I need to pick them up onto my needle, coming through from the left to the right, because I'm going to start by knitting these stitches as well, all the way along. Oh my gosh, that went on just like that. Amazing. Okay, so now they're on what will be my left needle. I know mine's on a cable, but it's only because I need short needles. But if I was working the normal way with the longer needles, this would just be the second needle, the left needle it will become. All right, so pulling out that waste yarn again. So here on the right are the stitches I've already worked, and here on the left are the stitches I'm going to work, which is Bunny's right cheek on my left as I look at it. Okay, so now I'm going to again knit 6 stitches. So what we're sort of doing is mirroring what we've already done on the other load of stitches. There's a join happening here, which at the moment is quite loose, but as we work we'll tighten up, so don't worry too much about that. So that's 5 and that's 6. Just take it here, 2, 4 and 6. Okay, and then I'm going to do my decrease, which is slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over, knit 1, knit 2 together, and knit to the end. 3, 4, 4 and 5. So we've mirrored precisely what we did on the other side there. So if I just move that out of the way and have a little look, gosh, we're looking a little bit more face-like, aren't we? Admittedly still terrifying, but a little bit more face-like. And what I'm very much loving is the fact that we're making joins here just by knitting, so no sewing required at this point for quite a large amount of the head, which I like a lot. Just check your stitch count at this point. You should have 28 stitches at this point, so just make sure you have that before you move on. And the next row, row 2, is a straightforward purl row, and the only thing remarkable, and by that I mean the only thing to remark on about it, is the fact that you just, as we go across that little join in the center there, really pull your tension taut, and also really for the 2 stitches either side of it. I've dropped my yarn, I'll leave it down there, it's fine. Yeah, pull the tension nice and taut, which will just reinforce that join a little bit in the early stages of the rows. That's what we want. Right, so I'm coming up to that join. I'm just going to be really theatrical in my tightening of the tension as I go over it. Okay, so just really taut and sort of kind of 4 or 5 stitches and carry on. All right, so that's all I'm going to be doing for row 2. I'm going to get to the end of row 4 in this section because it's quite unremarkable. We've got a decrease, I think, on the next row, but it is quite unremarkable. So I'm going to get to the end of row 4 and then we're going to look at row 5 because we've got some casting off. How exciting. So I will see you at the end of row 5. Sorry, at the end of row 4. Okay, so I'm at the beginning of row 5 and we're going to cast off some stitches here. We're going to cast off 7 stitches. All right, for the, I'll show you which part. We're going to be casting off a bit, a bit along here. We don't need to work that anymore at the moment. So just be aware that when you're casting off 7 stitches, you can't count until you've actually kind of cast it off. I'll show you what I mean. I've fallen foul of this. I'm sure you haven't, but just in case. So I'm going to knit 1, then I'm going to knit 2. And I'm going to pass the first stitch over the second. Right, and only now can I say I have cast off 1 stitch. Okay, even though I've worked 2, I've only cast off 1. So that's 1. That's 2. So you can only count when you've passed the stitch over. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, and now 7. So 7 stitches are now cast off there. I'm now going to knit the next 6 stitches, right, which will make up this, let's start to make this left ear. So I'm going to knit 6 stitches, which actually gives me 7 stitches in total on my right needle. All right, because I had 1 left over from the casting off, didn't I? So 2, 4, 5, 6 and 7. 2, 4, 6, 7 stitches left on this needle here, on my right needle. And now I'm going to put the remaining 13 stitches from my left needle back onto some waste yarn. Okay, you can use a stitch holder if you want, but nothing, again, we've done this before, so it's nothing new under the sun for you, is there? Whoops, just dropped that one. Just pop a knot in there. Starting to look very face-like. I like it a lot. Right, so I've got 7 stitches here where I'm going to start my ear, and I've got 13 stitches waiting for whatever's going to come next over here. So ready to start Bunny's left ear. Right, we are starting Bunny's left ear, and on our first row, we're starting with the wrong side facing us, so we're looking very clearly at the purl side of the work here. And the first thing that we're going to do is cast on 7 stitches, and if you remember, our pattern at the very beginning says to use cable cast on throughout, so I have done a video to remind you how to do that, but here's just a very brief reminder. So I'm going to go as if to knit the first stitch, but rather than pull that stitch off of the needle, I'm going to stretch out that loop and put it up and on to the end of the left needle. So that's 1 stitch cast on. I'm now going to put my needle between stitches numbers 1 and 2 on that needle, wrap it with the yarn, oops, pull up a loop and get that onto the left needle, and so on. So I've now cast on 2 stitches. I'm just going to carry on until I've got 7. That's 3, 6 and 7. So there's 7 extra stitches on my needle now, so 14 stitches in total. I'm just going to check that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and I am now going to purl all the way back across all of those stitches, including those, obviously those new ones that I have just cast on. Right, so we're on row 2 now, which is an increase row, and increases you probably already know about on an increase you probably already know about, a knit front and back increase. I think we've probably done those before, but just a quick reminder. Knit into the front of the stitch, then knit into the back of the stitch, and only when you've done that, take it off the end and you've got 2 stitches there. Okay, I'm going to knit all the way across and then do exactly the same on the last stitch at the other end. Right, I'm just going to stop there because I just wanted to complete those couple of rows so you could see what's happening. So when I made my sample of this, my practice run, if you like, it completely stumped me, and helpfully I've sewn it up. So I can't really show you. But what you're actually going to be doing is making a kind of flap shape, which you will ultimately fold in half. So although it looks a bit ungainly and like it's extending almost in the wrong direction, go with it. It works absolutely fine, and you're going to see what I mean, because I'm going to work a bit more and show you it. So there isn't anything difficult about working this ear. It's just a bit, it sort of stumped me because it didn't look very logical to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work this part. You don't need me to show you how to do knitting 2 together and all that kind of thing, and you certainly don't need me to show you how to work 5 rows of stocking stitch. So I'm going to work these is it 16 rows? 16 rows, and I'm going to come back to you at row 17 where there's just a little bit of casting off, and then you'll be able to see the construction of this ear and how it looks peculiar but works amazingly. So I'll see you at the beginning of row 17. Okay, I've worked 16 rows of the left ear and we're ready to fasten off this ear. So I just wanted to show you the little cast off or fasten off method for the ears. Right, I'm just going to show you casting off. So row 17 of the little ears. Right, so we're going to purl 2 together. Oh, stood on the yarn. Purl 2 together. Twice I've stood on the yarn. Because I got in a muddle with this, truthfully. And it's that little cast off trick again, isn't it? So I've purled 2 together, and my pattern says cast off next 3 stitches. So what I've taken that to mean is I'm going to do 1 purl, then I'm going to do a 2nd purl. All right, and I'm going to do the first that I've just done over the 2nd. That's cast off 1. Then I'm going to do same again. That's 2. Then I'm going to do the last stitch. This probably would never in a million years trip you up, but it did me. So just in case. And then 3. So I've now got kind of 2 stitches quite far apart. And all I'm going to do now is just slip this very first one that I did over the very last. Okay, and that is an ear cast off. So I'm just going to cut this yarn and pass it through there. So that's how to cast off on row 17. And if I show you this side, we've got a lovely ear, a lovely little ear. So that is the left ear. I'm going to show you how to get started now on the right ear. So for the right ear, we need to return to those stitches that we've got held on waste yarn, and we need to get those back on our needle. So we're going to get them back on with the working side, or the right side, sorry, of the work facing us. We're going to put our stitches back into play with the needle coming from the left to right, so they're ready to knit. Just as I think we did first time round, really. So they are sliding on there nice and easily. Okay, and I'm just going to pull out that yarn. Right, so our stitches, our 13 stitches, are now ready to be worked. We work slightly differently this side at the beginning, just because we're going to cast some stitches on before we cast some off. So if you remember, on this side we cast off that little bit here there. We're going to want to do the same on this side, but we don't need, that's at the end of our needle, so we can't do that first up. We're working this sort of flat part first. So let's get on and do that. Right, we're going to start with casting on 8 stitches. So I haven't got any yarn attached yet, but that doesn't matter. I'm just going to work as normal, just putting a loop of the yarn around. We're still working with the cinnamon coloured yarn. So I've put my needle in as if to knit, and rather than take that loop off, because we're going to do some cable cast on, I'm going to put that loop back on to the needle. So I've created a stitch there. So that's my first cast on stitch. And I'm now going to work kind of cable cast on proper. And if you're not sure about this, I'll just say again, we have done a video to show you. So my needle's gone through between the first 2 stitches, pulling up a loop, and on it goes all the way until I've cast on 8 stitches. Okay, so I've cast on 8 stitches there. I might need to give the back a little pull to tighten it up, but don't worry, we'll soon take care of that when we start working the ears. Excuse me. Okay, so I've cast on those extra stitches. I'm going to knit 14 now. So just knitting back those that I've recently cast on. Okay. And now I'm going to cast off 7 stitches. I just want you to be aware here. 2, 4, 6, 7. It's all of these stitches that I'm going to cast off, and I need to make sure that I'm left with 14 stitches on this needle. I think it's 14, isn't it? 14. Yes, of course. Right, so the same thing as before. I need to knit 1, and then I need to knit another one before I cast off. All right, so now I've made my first cast off. Let me just stop there and check. I've got 14 here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 14. Then there is a little gap, and now I'm starting my cast off. So at the beginning of that cast off, you knit 1 stitch, and then you knit another one and pass that stitch over, and that's your first cast off stitch, leaving 14 on the right of the work before your cast off gap starts. Okay, if you don't do it that way, you're going to end up a stitch short. Won't thank me, because it's not nice to unpick cast off stitches. Says a person who's done it far too many times to count. Okay, so I'm just going all the way along, casting off those stitches. Now at the end, I'm going to cut the yarn. With the gigantic shears. I don't know where they've come from, I'm so sorry. And pass the end through to finish off that cast off edge there. Alright, so let's have a look. So you can see our sort of mirror happening. So on Bunny's got a one ear here, but on Bunny's left cheek we cast off, didn't we? And we've now done the same thing over on the right, and you can see we're now going to start working this ear again in very much the same way. So I'm not going to show you how to do that because it's kind of a repeat of what you've done already. And so I really don't need to show you that again. I'm going to come back and show you it when they're both done so you can see what it looks like at that stage though.
Ta-da! 2 ears finished. Let's move on to working some inner ears.